NFL rankings 2021, the top 20 centers. So this is the last offensive position before we get to the big one, the quarterback's most important and the most interesting for sure. But yeah, we'll knock this one out real quick. Top 20 centers in the NFL in 2021. With this list, yeah, this is just when the players on the field for this season. How are they? So age, injury status, not really concerned. It's more about if they're healthy on the field right now. What do they provide your team? I think it's a lot more interesting and a lot more helpful for predicting games in the future. And yeah, it's not about who's the best, who's the most athletic. It's just about who helps you win the most on the field. What do they do? What do they provide your team? Obviously, not fantasy rankings. These are all offensive linemen and no rookies. Once they're in the NFL, I can tell you how good they are. Until then, not much point in that. So, first five out: Lloyd Cushenberry, the third; Andre James, Ethan Pochich, Garrett Bradbury, Nick Gates. And this is something unique about the center position as opposed to really all the other ones we talked about. Because in this first five out for all the other positions, those players were still like really good a lot of times or pretty big positives. Here, not so much. Now it is one position as opposed to, there's when I include all the guards, all the tackles, all the receivers in one list, that makes sense. But yeah, with centers, you really at this point are kind of struggling. Now these guys aren't bad, but they are kind of bad in some areas or haven't shown like a ton of consistency at the high end. So with these guys, as opposed to other lists, you are kind of in trouble as of now if they're your starters. But yeah, running into the top 20 real quick here. Number 20, you got Ted Karras. So this tier right here is an important, I think, a distinction between the guys behind them, the guys out of them. And these guys are just neutrals. And as opposed to the other positions, that's kind of all it takes to get into the top 20, where before you needed, to be a really strong positive in your team. With this, it's just you just have to not suck, right? You have to not be negative. And that's where these three guys fit, all pretty similar players. Ted Karras on the Patriots, back with the Patriots now after starting for a year on the Dolphins. Pretty underrated player, a lot better than people give credit for. He's not great or good, like I just mentioned what this tier is, but he's definitely a guy that when he's on the field, you're not like in trouble or anything, and probably should be starting for a team. Certainly should be starting for a team somewhere around the NFL. But Patriots made another smart signing. He's on the field. Like I said, pretty good. Austin Ryder, Matt Skura, pretty similar players in terms of not really offer or add anything, but they're not going to kill you at any point. So you're fine there. But yeah, that's an important, like I said, distinction of that tier. So then the next one, and these guys are definitely better. There's a pretty large gap there because these guys are all slight positives to, okay positive. None of these guys are great at this point, but they're all okay. Chase Roullier on the Washington football team, just a little bit lacking in athleticism. As far as centers, they have a lot more run blocking responsibilities in the modern NFL in terms of being able to get up and down the field, up and down the line of scrimmage. Chase Roullier doesn't really have that. He's not horrible. He's just not as good as the guys ahead of him. Weston Richburg, player's been injured a lot of time, but when he's been on the field recently, he's good. I mean, he's still pretty good on the 49ers because that he missed at this point. It's almost 2 full years. So we'll see with this one because as opposed to other injury players where, they've gotten back to the field and you've seen that, they're still fine. Him, that's not necessarily the case, hard to say. But if he is healthy still, if he was who he was, definitely belongs to the side, maybe even a little bit higher. He's pretty good. So then we get 15, Alex Mack. This is the last of this tier. And Alex Mack, just at this point, age pretty clearly caught up to him to a point. Now, as a pass protector, he's still, fine. He's not going to be a disaster or anything, but he's a little bit weak. He's definitely lost a lot of the movement skills that made him a lot better earlier in his career. And, yeah, just kind of a slight positive, not really anything super impressive. He'll look good at the 49ers, but every center does. So then we get the next tier, and there's another one pretty good. Now, once you get to this spot, despite the lack of depth that I talked about this position, the high end's actually pretty good. All these guys up to here are all like pretty clear positives on your team, which is nice to see for a position. Like I said, that's kind of as weak as it is once you go down the list. So 14, Cody Whitehair, 13, Eric McCoy, 12, Matt Paradis, and 11, Mitch Morse. All fairly similar players outside of Whitehair in terms of being these more like, modern move centers who can get out into space and do some work. All really similar in terms of impact. Cody Whitehair a little bit more on the slower but stronger side, but yeah, they're all fine in pass protection. They're fine as run blockers. They're not going to kill anybody consistently, but they're not too bad at all. And definitely if they're on your team, you don't need to upgrade. It would be difficult to easily find an upgrade. So yeah, then right away we get into the top 10, and here another fairly sizable tier gap because now all these guys going forward are like good. And this is the strength of this position for sure is the top 10 here. So number 10, Ryan Kelly. Number 9, Brandon Linder. Number 8, Rodney Hudson. All guys with really positive impacts on their team offensively. Ryan Kelly, kind of more of an all-around guy, Brandon Linder, same thing, just a little bit more weighted to the run game. Rodney Hudson, same thing, but the other way as far as a pass protector goes. Main one here, Rodney Hudson, just at this age is a little bit weaker, and I think he maybe always was overrated. Isn't going to be the right word because I know a lot of people love Rodney Hudson. I think he's good, obviously, but as a run blocker, he's good, but he wasn't like destroying people or eliminating second level defenders all the time. But as pass protector, he's really, really, really good. Just maybe lost a little bit of strength in that area at this point. Hence why he's down here. But again, all these guys, clear positives, really good players. Then we get number 7, Ben Jones. Number 6, Ryan Jensen. Number 5, J.C. Tretter. Again, all excellent players. Provide a ton of value to their teams. You could argue there's a little bit of a mini tier break up to these 3. Not really meaningful, so I didn't bother with it. But these guys, yeah, they don't really suck at anything. Especially these are really, really, really big positives in the run game. Jensen and Tretter can struggle a little bit with like strength and blitz pickups sometimes, which is why kind of the difference between them and the tier break ahead of them. But really, it's not important at that point. They're all, clear positives, really good players. So we get into the top 4 here, which is its own tier. Again, pretty small gap between the last one and this one, but I think it is there because these 4 players we're going to talk about, starting with number 4, David Andrews here, are just good at everything like all the time. And that's what provides the most value, especially the center position, is just if you never fuck up there, right, then you're constantly adding positives, which from a position where, it's hard to like be the one source of play succeeding is definitely important. So, David Andrews, really good on the Patriots. Had a little bit of injury issues last year, but when he plays, he just doesn't lose, ever, basically. It's very, very rare. Number 3, Jason Kelce, same thing, but you add into it his ability to kill linebackers all the time, which I think he's probably up there with only maybe George Kittle as far as limiting second-level defenders. The reason he's not like number 1 or 2, despite me thinking he's good at that, is actually as a pass protector, he's not like perfect at this point. He can get rocked a little bit. He is like very clearly small, and that does show up. Now it's not like enough for me to care. He's in the top tier centers, number 3 overall. Like it's not some horrible thing. I just think it's the difference between him and the guys ahead of him. But he's super valuable, especially as a run blocker. Number 2, Corey Linsley, newly on the Chargers, formerly of the Packers. Packers 100% know what they're doing. Obviously, they also had J.C. Tretter, a former Packer, in this top 10 here too. So top 5, Corey Linsley, though, huge part of the Packers having one of the best offensive lines in the NFL for the last, forever, basically, but 5 years for sure. Again, a player, he just doesn't lose and is constantly providing positives. Really, really, really good. And at number 1, Frank Ragnow on the Lions. I think pretty underrated player at this point. This guy adds, you take all the positives of constantly winning, like basically every play, but then you add in, not quite to the level of Jason Kelce, but you add in a fairly close comparison as far as being a second-level run blocker, and at the line of scrimmage too, that the other guys kind of lack a little bit, and that's what puts him at number 1. Again, it's close. It's not really a meaningful difference between this top tier, but Frank Ragnow kind of combines all the stuff that they do, which is a little bit more of the higher end, and that's what gets it there. So, top 20 centers, like I said, the top of this position group, actually pretty good, but the depth does lack a little bit. But on to the quarterbacks. Most interesting one for sure.